NRA TV with Colion Noir.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Seeing Live. I'm Colion Noir. Every year we see new innovations in the firearm industry that help us shoot better, but our first guest is taking firearms innovation to a whole new level. It's Cody Wilson of Defense Distributed. What's going on, man?
Hey, Mr. Noir. Good to see you, man.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So let's jump right into it, man. Talk to me about Defense Distributed. Let's talk about the catalyst for the organization and the company and how we got to the point where we are now.
I guess you could compare our inspiration to something like WikiLeaks.
Okay.
Around the same time WikiLeaks was really making its name, we recognized, the internet can do, and granted, WikiLeaks is controversial, but we realized the internet can do a lot for guns and the technical data related to guns that WikiLeaks was kind of doing to disrupt the governments. We believe we could do to better enable people's rights to keep and bear arms.
Gotcha. It's an interesting perspective you have there, because I've always said one of the biggest allies that I think we've had within the gun industry, by and large, was the internet. Just that free flow of information that allows us to counter a lot of the kind of falsified narrative, more or less, that's been going on with respect to the gun debate in this country. You've taken it a step further and kind of into the more practical, tangible elements of the benefits that come with having the internet available to us. So, and I know you probably told this story tens and thousands of times, but let's talk about your journey through the very beginnings of the first 3D printed gun, and then where the evolution, at what point in evolution we are now in terms of what does the world look like with
basically there were 3D printing had come from like a very confined area in the academy. Okay, very simple materials, very brittle, and there had been like some innovations done with like Chrysler and car companies, but the materials weren't meant to be anything more than prototyping materials.
Gotcha.
But then a change began to happen maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, where the materials and the processes became fast enough and robust enough to where the prototyping that you were making ended up looking like and feeling like the finished goods themselves. So you could begin to jump this canyon to where now I'm making finished goods from the device instead of first stage prototype goods. And so it simply begs the question. You begin to assume, oh, hey, I'll just make the thing I want to have directly from the machine itself. And that was it. So we just began to use common materials that were available at the time, and then we put them to use.
Gotcha. And so when you first started doing this, did you have an end goal in mind from the very beginning, or was it something you kind of stumbled on? It's like, you know what, at a later point you realize, I could really take this somewhere.
I think the idea the whole time, and it's, gosh, I guess it's been a little bit now, but the whole time we were thinking there was going to be 1 or 2 guns or gun parts. We'd be able to put them online and people would be able to download them, and it would really be challenging for a lot of people. And it worked just that way. And of course our government wasn't exactly pleased when we came out with the initial devices. But I think it demonstrated what the future was going to be like, right? The internet, both disrupting media, like in your example, but in actually in disrupting articles, like in our example, and even traditional manufacturing to a degree, people would be able to have direct access to these things.
Absolutely. So how have you been able to manage, because I'm not even going to ask you or insult you by asking what kind of pushback that you've got, more or less, because I know that you've had plenty of it. How have you been managing it thus far? And I'm pretty sure preemptively, I'm pretty sure you kind of put things in place to deal with it as well, correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, we got the best legal talent that there is, basically, on this, and of course we share some communications with the NRA. But basically, the idea is we anticipate that there's always going to be difficulty, just because it's the nature of the legal system and the fact that the technology isn't settled. The law, in some sense, hasn't fully apprehended what this is, so there's always going to be this kind of controversy about what we're doing. But we're confident enough in the right to keep and bear arms that we believe people should have access to this technology. So we'll continue to push it, Yeah,
absolutely. So now, with respect to 3D printing, I think initially it more or less represented a kind of symbolic. It was symbolism with respect to the idea of freedom and our freedoms under the Second Amendment. But as time has gone on, it's progressed in its ability, and like you said, in the types of material used. Where do you see 3D printing, say, 10, 20 years from now? And,
yeah. I'm seeing, so there's materials now in ceramics and sintered metals and composites that behave just like certain kinds of metals, like aluminum and other soft metals. I mean, we're seeing those in use right now. Some of the printers aren't that accurate, but the material properties are there. So look, I see 3D printing not as a replacement of traditional manufacturing, and certainly not in the gun world. I've been accused of saying, oh, this is the replacement. No. We're realistic. We know this is supplementary, and of course we're seeing traditional manufacturers use 3D printing already in prototyping and customization. But I believe that there will be kind of interesting side roads that the gun world will take, and new kinds of mechanisms that can be innovated with these new materials and these new ways of machining that will advance our industry. And especially in a time where, look, we've kind of been there, done that on the budget AR, right?
Yeah.
We've been there, done that on a lot of things. And now I think we'll be able to see new and interesting innovations because the market pressures are there for innovation. We're no longer living under Obama, right? We're going to have to see people do new things. It's not just the fire sale and guns anymore. So the technology and the economy is there. I think 3D printing is going to be a part of the new stuff that you begin to see. It's
interesting you said that. I've said that on a couple of interviews I've done before, or where I talk about the idea that, there isn't this kind of I want to call it a free-for-all, but that we've always kind of had this rhythm of ups and downs, peaks and valleys with respect to the gun industry, but we always knew where the spikes were coming from, especially considering the political landscape. But I think now, where things are kind of leveling off a little bit now, considering the current administration, we do find ourselves in a position, and a unique one, I think it's a great one, where, I think a lot of manufacturers are now going to be forced to innovate. And, it creates that kind of pressure to essentially start creating diamonds, because I think a lot of people were kind of riding the wave of the expected peaks and valleys of the gun industry in a lot of ways. So I definitely agree with you in that regard. Now, what is Ghost Gunner?
Ghost Gunners are, we have like a primary manufacturing line, like a primary product we sell right now as defense distributed. So, you don't make a lot of money on 3D printed guns. And
clearly.
The way that we support research, well, you shouldn't anyway.
Right.
But the way that we support our research and development right now, and of course we have a lawsuit against the government as well, the way we support a lot of our efforts is we sell this machine called the Ghost Gunner. It's a CNC mill. It's a powered CNC mill, fits on the desktop. It's got all the modern microcontrollers, and it uses a lot of the same software that you'd see in 3D printing. It uses G-code and other types of concepts from modeling. But we allow you to do milling, very simple, efficient milling. Can you still see me?
Can't see you, but I can still hear you.
That's weird. Okay, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
We'll continue. I think someone's just trying to call me or something because we're on my phone. But anyway, the Ghost Gunner is basically our flagship product. So we've taken a lot of things that we've learned in the 3D printing days, and we've filtered into a package that allows you to make, let's say, like your own AR-15 receiver or your own 308 receiver. And what we hope to announce this summer is we'll allow you to finish handgun receivers for yourself. We believe the 1911 and the Glock, the compact Glock frames will be the first frames that display on the machine.
I'd be very interesting to see a 1911 3D printed. Like that is something I would find incredibly fascinating.
I've got them in my office right now. I mean, we've been doing,
how does 3D printing in a lot of ways, and I know a lot of it is material contingent. How does it typically handle like the higher pressure rounds of? Well, I mean, I guess running. Like the 40s and the 357 SIGs and things of that nature,
I see the confusion. So I don't mean that this machine that we're using is not a 3D printer.
Okay.
It's a CNC mill.
Gotcha.
So no, I'm certainly not saying you're gonna plastic print a 1911. No. I'm talking about you're doing pocket milling and finishing of 80% receivers.
Gotcha.
Most common on something like the Ghost Gunner. So we're kind of playing up this idea, this bad faith idea of the ghost gun. Well, no, you're an American citizen. You have the right to make a gun for yourself, and it should be certain providers and manufacturers should help you do that for yourself if that's something that you want to do. Or let's say you want to go into business for yourself. I want to become an FFL. Well, I don't want to buy a $30,000 CNC. Maybe I'll buy an entry-level CNC like this one, and like maybe learn some gunsmithing or some engraving or some simple milling. That's where our product comes in. So it serves that kind of entry-level place in the market right now.
Gotcha. So I wanted to ask you from that perspective. Can you still hear me? Because we did lose your visual. Okay, there you go. So where do you see the line? There's a lot of people who look at the idea of the Second Amendment and say, we always want to balance this line between keeping guns out of the hands of people who we don't want to have them, and then allowing the people who should have them to have them. You take a rather unique approach, considering the masses, with respect to the idea of just kind of having, I don't want to cheapen it by calling it a free for all, but making,
I hear you.
Yeah. Making,
it's a fair question.
Yeah.
I see a line like you do, and I think like most responsible gun owners do. I think irresponsible people shouldn't have guns, for example, right? I think violent criminals and people that, are a threat to themselves and others shouldn't have guns. I believe that there's a court system that largely an efficient one that can very quickly take these things away from you if you prove yourself to be this kind of danger. And so I take a more liberal political approach, which is that it is no excuse that bad things can happen with guns and people can do bad things with them. That's no excuse to then take away guns from whole classes of people. So I believe, I think it's unique to our American politics, but I believe that having at first a trust in the people's right, the popular right to keep and bear arms, it's healthy. It's healthy to let people enjoy that right until they demonstrate that they can't be trusted with it, rather than the other way around, which is where it is everywhere else in the world. Yeah,
no, and I largely agree with you with respect to that. I think because if you continue down the thought process of, looking at, okay, well, somebody bad could potentially do this with a firearm, so therefore let's restrict this from a massive class of people. We do find ourselves kind of diving into this world of a Minority Report that I honestly think is childish. And so we start trying to anticipate crimes and then therefore restricting people's rights based on the anticipation of what somebody may do with something. I just find it oddly unique that a lot of it that level of anticipation only really takes place when you're talking about firearms. They don't do it with cars. They don't do it with any other items in this world that are largely may not have been designed to be dangerous, but have been used dangerously by people. But everything seems to be kind of have this hyper focus when it comes to firearms in that regard. How much of that do you think stems from just the kind of mental perception that people have about firearms? I think people tend to lock on to firearms as being the overall arcing danger aspect of it because of the theatrics involved around it. It's loud, it goes bang, it does all these things, and so therefore it's like, oh no, we've got to do something about that. How much of you think that just a psychological component of that plays a part in that?
I think it's probably most of it. A lot of people are willing to be just kind of look, I'm not trying to be mean, Eric, because I think there's a lot of goodwill and good faith on the other side. Maybe not as much as is presented, but I think people are willing to be used by the media, and they're willing to be. We're psychologically affected by things like shootings in a way that's much more pronounced than like the data would. And you can't help it. It just does something to you. I get it. I'm sympathetic to it, and I understand that there are people on the other side of the issue because it's just like you said. It just encourages a certain theatrical response. It's very dramatic, but we have something unique here politically and historically. And I believe in honoring it. And like you mentioned cars and other things, there are these analogies. But remember, in the Bill of Rights, there's no right to keep and bear an automobile.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, this is a very specific, unique political implement, and we should honor the original thinking of our founding fathers. At least, I mean, that's one perspective. There's other perspectives, but I think that's a thoroughly American one.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, unfortunately, I just glanced at the clock. We're out of time. But
well, I'm glad we could put it together, man.
Absolutely. No, the pleasure was all mine, man. I wish we could have more time to continue the conversation. Hopefully, we can have you back on the show. But man, thank you very much, man. Thanks for joining us, and you have fun out there in Austin. I just realized you were in Austin.
Anytime, man. Hey, keep talking, man.
Absolutely, man. Thanks a lot, man. You take care, Cody. All right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to find out about the pink pistols.